Aloha, hockey fans, and welcome to the BlueNote Fan Report. I'm Guy, the HawaiiBlue Fan, and I'm your host on the program that's by a fan, for the fans, and you gotta know all about you, the fans. In the last couple of episodes, I've done some pretty good interviews. I got to interview Jim Thomas. I did an interview with Bruce Affleck, the president of the Blues Alumni Association. I got to interview Kathy Golick from Laura Brannigan's management team, legacy management team. And they've been really fun and they've been good. And today I feel like I stepped up to the plate, and I hope I hit a home run. Today my interview is with five-time Stanley Cup winner, Venza winner, I can never say that right, all-star, and all-around good guy, Grant Fuhr. That's right, Hall of Famer Grant Fuhr. Grant Fuhr played for 19 years on 5 teams. He spent 10 years with the Edmonton Oilers. He did 4 years with the St. Louis Blues. He played for Toronto. He played for Buffalo, and he ended his career in Calgary. Grant had a .338 career goals against average and an .887 save percentage, but those numbers really don't tell the truth about how great Grant was. Grant had a movie made about him called Making Coco. It is on Amazon Prime, and in that, Wayne Gretzky, the great one, said Grant Fuhr is the greatest goalie to ever play in the NHL. I agree with that, though the NHL Network had Grant ranked 11th of all-time goalies. Too low in my eye, way too low. So I want you all to give a really big Hawaii Blues fan clan welcome to Hall of Famer Grant Fuhr. So Hawaii Blues fan clan, give a huge warm welcome to the man who needs no introduction, Hall of Famer number 31, Grant Fuhr. Grant, welcome to the BlueNote Fan Report.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So Grant, could you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you started playing hockey?
Well, I grew up in a little town called Spruce Grove, which was just outside of Edmonton, up in Canada, and was lucky enough to have a good group of friends that all started to play, so we all played as kids and kind of progressed from there.
So when did you get to the point where you felt like, this could be your career?
Well, I think every kid dreams of playing in the National Hockey League. I mean, I wasn't any different than that. It's just a matter of, I think I really figured it out when I was probably about my third year pro. Yeah. I mean, you always hope and dream, and yeah, I got there my first year, but it's hard to stick there. So about my third year pro, I started to feel more comfortable.
Yep. So you recently had a movie made called Making Coco, and in that, and I hope I say his last name right, Glenn Slather talked about not wanting to draft you, but was told that you were the guy you'd been seeing. So in the early days, how were the early days in Edmonton for you with having a coach that didn't want you there?
See, the first time I'd ever heard that was in the movie. Mm-hmm. So the fun part was going to training camp, we had a lot of veteran goalies. Andy Moe just come off a good playoff run against Montreal. They had Gary Edwards there, who had been in the league for a long time. Ronnie Lowe was there. Eddie Mio was there. So they had a lot of veteran goalies. So for me to go to camp, it was actually really easy because I didn't expect to stay. I just got to go play.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. So now you're in your first year, and this was 80-81, if I'm correct?
It was.
Yeah, and so you're out there with Wayne Gretzky, with Messier, and so many that I can't. What was it like taking shots from them in practice?
It was fun. We had a great group of guys that had a great time practicing together. We had a great time playing together. And at 18 years old, you're just trying to fit in. Mm-hmm. So there's really no stress. All you're trying to do is not be the weak link of the group.
Yeah. Did taking shots from these guys maybe give you more confidence and help your play?
It does. I mean, you're playing with some of the best players in the world. So anytime that happens, you're only going to get better.
Right.
And the fact that all our guys were such good guys and always helpful with you, always would do extra stuff if you wanted to do extra things. So there's a great group of guys to be around.
In the movie, Wayne made the made the statement, you never wanted a piece of rubber behind you.
No, I was taught at a young age that as a goalie, you don't want pucks behind you, whether it be practice, whether you're fooling around, or whether you're in games. So I took pride in keeping the net empty.
Right. Now, there was one part of the movie that I'm going to ask you about, and it might make you laugh. You got to tell us about the tennis ball machine.
Yeah, that was actually my second year. I'd get off to a little bit of a tough start.
Mm-hmm.
I had a shoulder fixed over the course of the summer after my first year, so I came to camp a little bit heavy because I didn't have much of a chance to train. And Glenn had brought in a tennis ball machine, so we did a lot of work with the tennis ball machine over the first couple of months.
Yeah, what was it like getting stung by one of them tennis balls?
Well, it makes your hands better because you don't really want to catch one on the arm. They have a tendency to sting a little bit. So at that time, I was still playing a little bit of baseball and was playing catcher at that time, so it really didn't bother me a whole lot. It was something that was good for both sports.
So you ended up playing in 6 finals, winning 5. Can you tell us some of your impressions about that period in Oilers hockey? I mean, you guys were a dynasty, and there's no way you can get around that. So just some of your impressions about those years, if you don't mind.
Well, the early years in Edmonton, I mean, my first year we had a really good hockey team, and we ended up losing to LA in the Miracle of Manchester, where we blew a 5-0 lead. So that was a learning process for us. The next year we got to the finals against the Islanders, and we got swept 4 games in a row. So again, we had some success, but then we had a little bit of failure at the end. So another good learning process. After that, we figured it out, where you just have to give a little bit more to win. And it took us, 3 years, 4 years to get that process figured out. But once we did, everybody bought into it.
I thought the other great thing in the movie, and I forget who it was, when they drafted you, said, "Hey, I don't block shots. So I hope you don't expect me to block them now."
Koff was never a big fan of blocking shots. So.
Yeah, I guess, that's a little bit, we'll talk a little more about today's game and yesterday's game, but when you've got some of these guys coming down with you, you knew that there was no defense for you. So how did you stay in the game knowing that you were going to be facing some of this?
We played a different type of defense. Our defense was offense, where we would trade chances with the other team. And your job is to make one more save than the other goalie. Yeah. So in a formula like that, you know you're going to get lots of work. You know you're going to give up some chances, but you also know you're going to score a lot of goals. So it gives you room to work with.
Now in 80-81, if I'm right, you were the backup, correct?
My first year I played about 50%.
Okay. So that's the year, if I remember right, that's the year that Wayne scored 92 goals and 212 points?
My second year, 82.
82. So what was it like watching him when he was just destroying the record book?
You know what? It was fun to watch from day one right through till I finished playing. I mean, he's the greatest player in the game, and he did things that would amaze you every day, even in practice. So I had the best seat in the house for it.
So I had an interview with Tom Calhoun. I think you might remember him. He's the announcer for the Blues, the PA announcer. And he talked about a Gretzky story where Gretzky had wanted him to go to the Playboy Club with him. Pretty interesting little story. Do you have any Gretzky stories you could share with us? And remember, this show is PG-13 to R, somewhere in there.
You know what? The greatest thing about our team is we did everything as a team. I mean, if we had young guys come in, Gretz would make sure they were comfortable, whether it be staying at his place, whether making sure that they got fed. He was always a great leader in that sense.
Yeah, I had Jamie Rivers on, and Jamie had told me that when he first walked into the locker room and, Gretzky sitting there reading a newspaper, it's like he went up to him, "Hi, Mr. Gretzky," and Wayne knew who he was and that. So it really seemed like Wayne paid attention to everybody.
He does. I mean, that was the great thing, is he made everybody feel comfortable. Right. I mean, he made me feel comfortable from my first day. I think all the guys that came in after me, he always made you feel like you were part of the team. Yeah. And that's the great part of leadership.
So you and him became fast friends, from what I understand. And
we became good friends.
Yeah. So when actually, and I'll tell you this in a sec. So when it came time for you to come to St. Louis, he was a little involved in that. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think as the story goes, he ran into Mike Keenan somewhere in New York, and Mike Keenan was looking to sign a goalie. Mm-hmm. So I guess he sold Mike on signing me.
Right. So how did that go with Mike? I mean, and the reason I ask is going to get into another question later. His nickname was Iron Mike, and he had this, and I forget, I can't remember the word, but everyone looked at him as just being this iron-fisted leader, this mean, tough SOB. Was he hard to deal with, like in the negotiations, in the locker room?
No, I mean, we got off to a little bit of a shaky start at the beginning, but in the end, he was easy to play for. I mean, it wasn't like there was a gray area. It was either it is or it isn't. Yeah. And I don't mind that because Glenn Sather was a lot like that. Yeah. John Muckman was a lot like that, where they ask you to play, you play. Yeah. There's no gray area to it.
Yeah, and I was kind of thinking that as I was watching that movie, and listening to Glenn, I mean, how he sounded, I'm going, wow, did Iron Mike, like, Keaton go under him? Because they sounded, I mean, when they talked, it was like almost the same pattern.
They were very similar. Yeah. I mean, Glenn was probably a little more laid back than Mike was.
Yeah. Oh, really?
But yeah, well, Mike liked to assert that he was in control, whereas Glenn, you knew he was in control without him having to assert himself.
Yeah. So you get there in 95, 96. Now, there's something amazing about this team for the Blues. There were 7, including yourself, Hall of Famers playing on that team come the end of the season. What was that team like for you? I mean, what was it like in the Keel?
You know, it was a great team to play for. I mean, I got to play with some guys that I hadn't played with before, that you always play against, and you respect playing against them, but you realize that they were better players than you even thought. Like Al McInnes, you knew how good he was offensively, but I didn't realize at the time how good he was defensively until you finally get to see it every day. And Chris Pronger was a phenomenal player. Hully was always fun to play with. I mean, Dale Hawerchuk was a good player. Pierre Turgeon was a good player. So it was an opportunity to play with some guys that were very talented.
I'm taking it that as quick as you became friends with Gretzky, that you became friends with Hully just as quick?
Oh yeah, Hully and I became good friends. We're still good friends.
So you got to tell us at least one story about you guys out in town in St. Louis. You got to have at least one you can tell us.
Hey, not so much when we were out in the town, but things weren't going well between, say, players and coach. Hully and I spent a lot of time on the golf course together. So we counseled each other.
Yeah. Right. Getting back to this a little bit, so in 95, 96, you guys are in the playoffs. You're going into the playoffs, not the playoffs yet, but going into the playoffs. You've got all these guys. Did you guys have this sense that this was your year, that you were going to the finals?
That was a hockey team that had a chance to win a cup. I mean, of all the teams I played on that won Stanley Cups, that group was pretty much as talented as any of those teams.
Right. So you got injured, and it was against Toronto, if I remember correctly, in the first game of the playoffs?
Yeah, it was, unfortunately.
Yeah. Can you, and I've seen the play, I've seen the movie. I know you guys have talked about it. Can you talk a little bit about that and what happened and what you saw and how just your impressions of it, your feelings?
Well, you know what? Unfortunately, it's something that happens in the playoffs where if you happen to be playing well, players always have a tendency to fall on you. I mean, by that time I was, in my 12th or 13th year in the league already, and it had happened 1,000 times before where somebody falls on you after a whistle and you never ever get hurt. Yeah. It just happened to be the one time that I had a leg in kind of a bad spot and tore up a knee. So one of those unfortunate things. Yeah,
but I also heard that you you had a torn ACL and a torn MCL, correct?
I did.
You still wanted to play?
Yeah, I wanted to try at least.
You wanted to try at least.
That worked so good though.
Which leg was it? Your right or your left?
My right leg.
Say again. Your right? Was that your dominant leg?
Pretty equal with both legs.
Yeah. Okay. So now you get into the first round. You get through the first round against Toronto, and you're playing the mighty Detroit Red Wings. Did you travel with the team, or were you in St. Louis at the time?
No, I actually was in St. Louis having surgery. So okay. I get to watch the games on TV. That was as close as I could get to it.
Right. So did you watch Game 7 then, I take it?
I did. Actually, I had gone to the game.
Yeah.
So it's one of those unfortunate things.
For me, if you don't mind a quick personal experience, I was teaching. I was active duty Navy. I was in Great Lakes, Illinois, up south of Chicago, and I had the old pagers. Remember the old pagers back then? My wife, Japanese lady, didn't know anything about hockey, but knew how much I loved it. So she's texting me, first time score 0-0, second time score, and OT1, and then all of a sudden my buzzer goes off, and it's just this like dot. Like she didn't want to tell me what happened. When Yzerman took that shot, and Casey let it go in, what was your feeling?
You're disappointed for the guys.
Yeah.
I mean, they played well enough to win the series.
Yeah.
And I think if we'd have got past Detroit, they still may have won a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, and that was probably the only stopping point, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at how good Detroit was over the next couple of years, we had a team that was as good and probably still should have won the series.
Right. So I kind of talked about this a little bit. When I talked to Bruce Affleck, he talked about Gretzky having an extension in place after the 95-96 season, and somehow there being some tension between him and Keenan that made him leave. Was that tension in the locker room also, or can you tell a little bit about that without going into too personal stuff? Or
sad part is I really don't know a whole lot about it.
Okay.
I know it started somewhere playoff time.
Yeah.
But from there, I really don't know much about it.
Did Wayne and Brett get along on the ice? Did they play well together? Did they gel?
Yeah, I mean, it took a little bit of time because obviously you've got a pure goal scorer and a pure passer, and it takes time for chemistry to set in. But I think by the time we rolled into playoffs, they'd have pretty good chemistry.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And I looked at when, I know you might have played against them when Hull played with Oates, that they had that, they knew where each other was going to be, and I felt like it just took a little time, but it also felt like, to me, Hull wanted to impress Gretzky, so he tried to do more than what he should have done.
You know what? It takes time for guys to settle into each other's patterns.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Wayne and Yari had that in Edmonton.
Yeah.
I think you would see it was starting to turn that way with Brett, where they were starting to be able to read off of each other. So it was only a matter of time before that was going to get really good.
Yeah, Gretzky stays in St. Louis. We're not waiting 52 years for a cup, are we?
No, I think if we'd kept that group together, we'd had a pretty good chance of winning a cup.
Oh, I know. I just, God. Yzerman, his name just makes me, even winning the cup this year, I still think about that, because that team should have won a cup in my eyes. So,
we were good enough.
Say again? Yeah, you were good enough. I absolutely agree with you. So in the movie, you talk about wanting to be a goalie coach again. So my question for you is, what would you say to both Allen and Bennington to help them out? Allen's had a decent year. Bennington's had an okay year, but not what he had in his rookie year. So what would be your advice, or what would you work on with each one of those?
Well, I think they're there to push each other. I mean, obviously, you'd like them both to play well, because the better they play, the less work you have to do. You want them to be able to push themselves from within the dressing room. So you're just working on the little things, the mindset. Mm-hmm. They're both very talented, so a lot of it's just the mental side of the game.
What would you do with Allen and his mental side?
You got to keep him positive. I think that's the biggest thing, and you got to make sure he gets into some games so he stays fresh and he stays into it. And I think that's the hardest thing with a backup goalie is you've got to get him into games so he can play, so that he can stay sharp.
Right. There was one thing that you said in the movie, or that was said about you in the movie. You didn't say it, but you gave up a goal. You just took the puck, threw it to center ice, and never said nothing to anyone else. Where today's goalies, they're pointing to their defensemen, they're trying to tell them that they made a mistake. What gave you that mindset that it was always your fault, or always, you shouldn't have let that happen, so now reset? How did you reset so quickly? I think that's the better.
You're the last line of defense, so somewhere along the way you made a mistake for it to go by you. So the best thing you can have as a goalie is a short memory. So once you fish it out, play on.
Control.
Once a game's over, you're allowed to think about it that night, but the sun comes up in the morning, it's a new day. You can't do anything about it, so on to the next game.
Okay, so I have a question for one of my viewers, a gentleman named Bob Kolzik. He wanted to know what your opinion is on today's equipment and, you know, how it affects the game. And if you were able to wear today's equipment in your time, would it have helped your game, and in what ways?
Well, obviously, the weight of it would have helped. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing between today's equipment and the old equipment is the old equipment weighed a lot of. A pair of pads probably weighed 25 pounds, whereas today they probably weigh 4 or 5 pounds. So obviously, you don't get as tired, and nothing hurts. And the upper body stuff, you can get hit in the upper body stuff, nothing hurts now.
Mm-hmm.
Where back then, if you missed catching something, it actually took a little bite out of you.
Right. Well, we talked a little bit about my next question offline. So the Blues are going to play the Minnesota Twins in the Winter Classic this year, depending on all this COVID-19 and the pause and all of that. So if that happens and they do decide to play a alumni game, would you be interested?
Depending on how the body felt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do everything according to how the body feels at that time. So I would take inventory of the body and probably have a look at it.
Well, I mean, that would get me to go no matter what to see you play again. Like I got luckily when you did play, I got to see you play a couple of times, and I was always amazed by your glove. Your glove, you seem to be able to snag a puck out of nowhere, or even if you didn't catch it, you were able to knock it or change its direction. What gave you such a great glove?
Just that good hand-eye coordination. I mean, I played a lot of baseball as a kid, of course, as a catcher. So the hand-eye coordination, I think, was always a strength that I had.
Yeah. And then we're kind of getting short on time. You played for 4 years in St. Louis. What can you tell us about your time in St. Louis, the city of St. Louis, the people? Have you gone back to St. Louis, or do you like going to St. Louis, things like that?
I love going back to St. Louis. It was a great place to play. I mean, I was a little disappointed that I didn't get to finish my career there. I always thought I was going to retire in the BlueNote. So I loved my time there. It was great teams to play for, and they're great fans to play for. I think that's the one thing that surprised me the most when I got to St. Louis was you knew they had football, you knew they had baseball, but it's a hockey town. And that was the biggest surprise I got when I got there is what a great hockey town it is.
Yeah, it's a lot of people don't realize this, and I talked to Kathy about this yesterday. Kathy Golick from Other Half Entertainment, Laura Brannigan's manager, that we like to say we have the best fans in baseball, but the secret to that is we also have probably some of the best fans in hockey, at least on this side of the border.
They're definitely diehards, and that's the great thing about it. So I enjoy coming back to St. Louis. It's a fun city to come back to, and the fans are always good.
Right. So last question for you, and I'm just going to kind of leave this open. Tell me something that you, just a story from your playing days, or something that people don't know about you, or something that you would want St. Louis Blues fans to know about you and your time there.
Well, I think my time in any team I played in anywhere in the league is I enjoyed being at the rink every day. I had fun right up until it was time to retire. And I think that gets lost sometimes. Guys forget that you actually have to have fun while you're playing. And sometimes coaches lose sight of that. But you have to enjoy going to the rink every day, and you have to have fun while you're playing. Right. I managed to do that right up until I retired.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think you're still having fun after you retired. So I know you do, like, I'm a small, rinky-dinky little show, and most people pass me over and don't pay attention. You quickly, hey, when can we set this up? I'm very gracious of that. So you do a lot of interviews and stuff. You're very friendly. Everyone loves talking to you. What about these interviews is enjoyable for you?
I like staying in touch with the fans. I mean, they were good enough to support me while I was playing that if they still have questions such, I still enjoy answering them. So it's fun to stay in touch with everybody.
No. So, Grant, just before we leave, I have a catchphrase, and I call it Bleeding Blue with you. Actually, I take that back. I have two little fans that I would love for you to say a quick shout-out to if you didn't mind. They're the Morton boys, Jackson and Alex. And they never got, they're 5 and 7, but they do little videos for me. If you've seen it, they do the, hey, Hawaii Blues fan, I'm bleeding blue with you. Could you say a special hello to Jackson and Alex for me and their younger brother, Chase?
Hey, Jackson, Alex, and Chase. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope everything's good, and go Blues.
Yeah, let's go Blues. And Grant, this is Guy, the Hawaii Blues fan. I'm bleeding blue with you. And I got to tell you, I know this is the first time, I hope it's not the last time, but thank you so much for showing up on the BlueNote Fan Report. Aloha,
My
Grant.
pleasure, guys.
Well, I got to thank Grant. That was amazing. He took out time for my little bitty 450 subscriber show. But you know what? You can get that number up. Share the videos, like the page, subscribe to the BlueNote Fan Report on YouTube, and I'll get some more Hall of Famers. This is Guy, the Hawaii Blues fan, saying, you got to know I'm bleeding blue with you. Hey, Martin boys, did you enjoy that call out? Aloha, mahalo, and I will see you on the next BlueNote Fan Report.